Hey guys, it's Boki here from Gigi's Fabric Shop, home to Juki Junkies, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the different compensating feet for the Juki TL machines and how you can use them in your sewing. So the three different feet that I'm going to talk about in this video is going to be the 1/4 inch compensating foot and the left and right 1.5 millimeter. Again, I would like to just say that these feet only work on the Juki TL machines. They do work on the J150 and I think they work on the 8700 as well, but these will not work on any computerized machines, okay? So just we're all on the same page. So the first one that I'd like to start off with is the one that kind of throws people off. This is a 1/4 inch compensating foot. This foot does come with the TL18, so double check your stash to make sure you don't have it. But this has a heavy set guide to the right with a spring that helps apply pressure when you're working with heavy materials. We do have a separate video on the different 1/4 inch feet, so I would highly recommend you guys watch that. We'll go ahead and link it in the description below so you can check that out. But this is only for heavy set materials. If you use it on anything thinner, it's going to kind of just stitch in place and create bunching. So the reason I wanted to bring this up is just because the name is a little confusing and the guide is to the right side, but it gives you an accurate 1/4 inch. So a good application on when you would use this is, let's say you were doing anything with binding. I do have a class on jukijunkies.com that you guys can still sign up for, where we talk about machine binding, and we actually use these feet in the video today, so you guys can sign up for that class. Check it in the description below. But when you're sewing on machine binding, you're going to be sewing it onto the back side of the quilt first, and then once it's sewed in place, you're going to flip it to the front. And in that application, that's when something like this would be very helpful, because you are working with a good amount of layers here. There's 2, 4, 5 layers of fabric here, so you would easily just put that foot on the machine and it's going to guide right along that guide, which actually has a little groove on the inside, so it's just going to help you feed that material through, applying a little bit of pressure to keep everything nice and taut, and that's how this would help in this sort of application. So for my bag makers, you're going to really like this type of foot, okay? Then once you have the whole top piece, or the put together, the binding, then you flip over the binding to the top. And in that process, we're going to actually use the left compensating 1.5 millimeter foot to sew right on that edge. So let's start off on there, and then I'll tell you why the right one is helpful as well. So the two different compensating feet, the 1.5, there's one that's left and one that's right. The left one has a spring on the left side that has a little spring. There's actually a spring on both parts of this foot, which is nice because when there's springs in feet, it helps you surf over different types of materials. It's going to make that easy adjustment from thick to thin, bulky to less bulky. So that's what that is helpful for. The guide on the left has a little groove, just like we noticed on the right 1/4 inch compensating foot as well. So that's going to help the fabric stay right close to the edge, and it being 1.5 millimeter means it's going to sew very close to the edge, which is going to be perfect for our application for doing quilt binding. And we're going to talk about the right and how that's helpful when we get to our next project, which will be installing top stitching or zippers like in bags and things like that. So let's start off with the left compensating foot first. I'm going to go ahead and install that. So now that I have my quilt sandwich, I brought that binding now to the top of the quilt sandwich, just using some clips to keep it nice and secure. We'll get a close-up on why this left compensating foot is so genius for this type of project. So I have my binding, okay, and I'm gonna prop the left guide on that left compensating foot right to the edge of my binding, okay, right to the edge. So watch what happens when I start sewing. It's going to sew right on the edge of that binding so perfectly, so then that way I don't even have to think about it. And I'm just going to start moving those pins. You see how that foot is guiding the edge and it's securing the edge of the binding, nice and consistent. So with that guide, you're going to stay nice and straight the entire time. You're going to get really close to the edge, and you have no problem doing the corners of binding either. So let's just stitch out to the edge so I can show you what it looks like. So save your hands from doing any type of machine binding. I always tell people, I did not buy an $1,000 machine to be doing anything by hand. And that's just my personal preference. Of course, I'm not bashing anybody that does hand sewing. I think that's a beautiful thing if you have the patience for it, but you won't find me doing that. So I'm gonna just use something to just kind of keep this nice and straight. So watch what happens as I get to the curve. I'm just gonna, or to the corner. I'm just gonna slow down nice and steady to make sure that it sews it in place. Once it sews that corner perfectly down, I'm gonna pivot, and I'm just gonna keep proceeding and following the edge of that guide with no problem. All right, so let's cut and see what we did. So here is our binding, you see how that is so perfectly and consistently sewing right on the edge. I don't see anything underneath. It's perfect. On the back side, you can have it match your back or whatever, but the point for me here is security. It's to have the binding together and perfect, and depending on how thick you cut your binding, you can avoid it stitching on the back of the quilt, or you can use a matching color. So it's nice and consistent, and then we get to that corner, it's gonna sew that little corner perfectly down. We're gonna pivot and keep sewing all the way through. So when you're done, you have a perfectly bound little mug rug, quilt, whatever it may be. This is even good for working with bags that have binding as well, because it's gonna sew right to the edge. So now how does this apply to other things if you're not a quilter? If you're used to doing bags and little zipper pouches, and this is my favorite part of zipper pouches, is when you have to top stitch those zippers. So here I have just a fun little mock-up. I was showing David kind of like how a zipper pouch would work, so he can kind of understand that application. I had the back here, everything's ready for piecing and to finish up the zipper pouch, but I do want to top stitch right along this edge, and I want to do it very close to that. So how this left compensating foot would work here is same kind of concept. That little guide is going to sit right to the left of the actual fabric in the valley of the zipper. It's going to sit right on that edge, and when I start sewing, it's going to help guide me, so that way I stay nice and consistent the whole time. And so right in that edge, keeping me perfectly straight. All right, so let's just kind of take a break here to see what I did. And voila, look at that. It perfectly top stitched that edge consistently all the way through, so I didn't have to work too hard. I didn't have to use a seam gauge or anything like that. I didn't even have to use the hinge zipper foot. In all honesty, I don't really use the hinge zipper foot in these types of projects. And here on the back side, you can see that it stays consistent just like on the top. So now if I wanted to do the other side, let's say, all right, now to the other side. I easily could do the other side with this foot. I would just have to turn the project, but this is where the other foot could come into play. I kind of like to say if you're left-handed or if you're right-handed, do what's going to make most sense to you. So working on the right one now, I would just put this foot on, and now it would sit to the right of the valley of the zipper, and it would do the same exact thing that the left one did. It's just going to sew right into that edge. So depending on what project you're doing, these feet are going to be very useful when you're doing top stitching very close to the edge. For example, like in bags, like in zippers, you could use this even for curves, in garment sewing or anything like that. Anything you want to get really, really close. I would say this is like an 1/8 of an inch, y'all. This is probably might even be closer, more like a 1/16 of an inch. So it's very, very close to the edge. I like this versus the hinge zipper feet because there's a guide to guide you versus you having to travel to the edge of the foot. So no advantage over the left or the right. The left you have to use when you're doing machine binding. The right and the left for zipper application, you would just have to turn the project right around for it to work. But it really comes down to if you're really more left-handed, if you're more right-handed, one or the other might make more sense to you in that application. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little video that we put together for you on the different compensating feet. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. Give this video a little like if you found it helpful. Also, I want to know, what do you guys use for when you're top stitching your zipper? So feel free to comment that down below in the comment section to tell me what foot you use when you're doing your top stitching of zippers. But all these feet are accessible to you on JukiJunkies.com, as well as any other little extra gadgets that I may have used in this video, the beautiful glide thread, just kind of kept it pretty simple today. So make sure you guys check that out. Refer to the other videos that I mentioned, and we post our videos every Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out on any fun educational opportunities. David and I have been working on more short videos for you, so definitely check those out. Shorts are great if you just want to get fast and to the point. These obviously go a little bit more in depth, so check out those short videos too if you want some fast information, and just have a great rest of your day. See you soon.